they make money without having a 9 to 5? What about the people that have made their money, acquired millions? How do they continue to have their money work for them? Knowledge is power, my people. Unfortunately, most people aren't too fond of sharing such information without a cost. So here it is for free. All I ask in return is that you pay it forward, share this info with others. This is Marlo Nicole, and you're listening to Business Bullish, where we cover business and money matters from start to finish. You can find me on Instagram at Miss Marlo Nicole with an MS Marlo Nicole, or at www.marlonicole.com. It's Marlo Nicole. Make sure you press subscribe and follow. Keep up with all of our updates. Whew, technology, girl, I tell you. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Quan.
Of course.
I learned something this morning. You're welcome. I learned something this morning. You do a much better job of introducing yourself than I do. So I would just say, hey, you guys, this is Quan Jamison, and she is an accounting pro, but I'm going to let you do it. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I am originally from Flint, Michigan. I moved to LA about 15 years ago. I started my career in public accounting at Ernst & Young. And then I moved over to the private sector. I work for Fox. I work in post-production now with most entertainment companies. But I also have my own business, Accounting for Entertainers, where I do personal finances for comedians, writers, all kinds of entertainers, athletes, helping them with their startup companies, their nonprofits, anything money related they call me for. And if I can't get the job done, I have a lot of business partners that I outsource certain functions to. So anything numbers related, I'm pretty much involved in.
Okay, so I have to ask you, how did you get into anything numbers related? That's not typically our thing. Well, at least not my thing. I've always hated math.
Well, you know what? I took a business class in high school and I loved it. And the funny thing is, in that class, we had to make our own companies and addresses and everything. And I always put Beverly Hills, California on my mail in high school when I was in Flint, and just manifesting things, speaking it into existence. Once I graduated from Michigan State, I went to Michigan State for accounting. And when I graduated, I said, I want to work in entertainment. So it was, either the New York atmosphere, I was tired of the cold, or the Atlanta, which, the Black Hollywood. And I was like, let me do LA. And I haven't turned back since. So it really started with that business class in high school. And accounting is really adding and subtracting. It's not as much math as people think. It's not a whole bunch of geometry and all of that stuff. It's literally just adding and subtracting, and a lot of laws. You have to understand the laws behind it.
Oh God! And if they don't stop changing them, I don't know how you keep up. That's especially the hardest part for me.
Exactly.
Right? The tax code has changed.
Administrations that affects it a lot. So yeah, it's constantly changing.
Okay, so I don't know if you know, but just something that I try to do here on Business Bullish is kind of talk everything business from A to Z. I have a lot of people that have constantly asked me different questions about being an entrepreneur, starting business, and I guess just having followed me through so many of my different business ventures. So with that being said, I wanted to talk to you about bookkeeping, taxes, accounting, and basically business structure. So what are your thoughts in terms of a business? How important is bookkeeping and business structure? I'll start with those two, because those are two that a lot of people, I won't say know a lot about. You hear a lot of people excited about having started an LLC. Very easy to do. You really don't even have to have a business to have an LLC, but people get really excited. Oh, I started a business, I have an LLC, and that's just like probably 5% of it, in my opinion.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we always say accounting is the language of business. So if you have a company, you have to know how well your company is doing financially. Aside from having to file taxes and, you want to know how much your company is worth. At some point, you probably want to sell it. At some point, you might want to go public. So all these companies, they start off small, but at a certain point, you grow.
Right.
And if you can't tell an investor or a shareholder or a bank what your financial stability is or where you are, then that's going to cause a lot of problems down the line. And just even from a budget standpoint, just for keeping your company alive, you need to know what you're spending too much money on, what you need to cut back on, what you probably can spend more on. So just finances in general, especially for a business, it lets you know how well your company is surviving. So that's definitely important. As you said, like starting up, filing paperwork with the state, that's the easy part. But as soon as you file that paperwork, even for LLC in the state of California, if you have no activity, you still owe franchise tax for $800.
Absolutely.
Like you're not
Absolutely.
doing anything. So
Exactly.
you definitely have to keep clean books and just knowing the basics. Like you don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to go to college for it, but learning the basics. And we'll probably talk about that a little more later, but I started like this children's financial literacy to teach
Yes.
basic
Yes.
terminology so everything isn't foreign. Because as soon as you start talking that language, someone gets turned off because I don't know what you're talking about. So when you
Exactly.
have those conversations earlier on and things start to make sense, like, oh, now that clicks, it helps people have more financial sense in terms of business or personal finances. So it's very important. Just the paperwork is the easy part, like you said.
Right. That is so funny that you say that. I did see your book. Congratulations on that. Later on, before we go, I want you to tell everyone where they can find that for their kids. But I'm going to tell parents right now, don't be offended if you need to read it yourself, because there are books called, so and so for dummies for a reason. It's not
Yeah,
insulting, but there are so many people that just don't understand the basics, and it's really difficult for someone like me. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a financial expert. But one of the things, like you said, that I learned about business a long time ago is just being able to be on top of the basic bookkeeping. And what about people that don't understand bookkeeping? Because I can tell you, about 12 years ago when I bought my first restaurant, 12 years ago, the lady that was keeping my books was charging me about $45 an hour. And I thought that was just highway robbery. Now, I know that it's not a cheap job, and it shouldn't be because it's that important. But for people that maybe are just starting out that can't afford bookkeeping, what are some of the things that they can do from a business perspective just to be able to kind of stay afloat and say, okay, I know that I'm making money because this is what I've spent and this is what I'm making?
I would say the most basic software is QuickBooks,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of classes for QuickBooks. There's a lot of the software does it for you. Now, back in the day, and I'm not that old, but it used to be pen and paper. You have a whole bunch of general ledgers, but now we have software that does almost everything for you. So
Right.
just understanding how to use a QuickBooks, how to create an invoice in there, and then it does the entry for you automatically. So even if you don't know debits and credits, assets, liabilities, equity, just understanding how to use the system will help a lot. But it's definitely good to have someone on your team, no matter the level. Like you said, you have your top tier, CPAs that's going to charge you, $200 an hour up there, and then you have,
Right.
general bookkeepers who might charge, 20 to 30 to $40 an hour to assist. But even still, just knowing the basics, like you made money, that should increase your revenue, So that's definitely important. And I would just suggest, taking a QuickBook class, or just like you said, all those books, Accounting for Dummies, they break it down to the most, minutia level possible. So
Right. Okay. Let's see. Have you ever, this goes back to the importance of bookkeeping and accounting. Have you ever been a part of an audit? Because I know from a business perspective, that's probably one of my biggest fears is for them to say, we need to see your accounting. And let's just say I made $1 trillion, but I only said I made $1 million, and now they're after me.
no, yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, I've been in audits for, public companies. I've been in audits for private companies. I've been in audits for just personal tax accountants. And similarly, the government uses a lot of software, so sometimes they're wrong. But when you get a letter from the government saying that you did something, you instantly, it's like get pulled over by the cops. Like,
it's
you
worse.
know you haven't done anything wrong. You like, oh shit, what did I break? What did I do? I'm sorry. Oh shoot, what did I do? It's the same thing with the IRS or with the franchise tax board. Is sometimes it's just a software that goes through, and then they just send you a letter saying you owe this, and it's up to you to say no, I don't, or you call a CPA and to assist with that. And then on the opposite side, there are certain companies who go through audits purposely because they're trying to get a loan through the bank, and the bank is like, I need audited financial statements, or they want to go public and you have to call an auditor to verify that your numbers are accurate. So I've been on both sides where it was voluntary or involuntary audits, but that goes back to the importance of keeping good books. If you know you've done nothing wrong, you haven't broke any laws, here's my books, and then you can go on about your business. But there are certain triggers that the government has where you're more susceptible to being audited. If you're showing losses every year, and then it's like, okay, are you really in business or is this a hobby? Or if you have too much entertainment expenses, is that reasonable? So there are certain triggers that do end up in audits, but keeping good books, it will eliminate all of that headache and paranoia.
I definitely agree. I have, let me knock on some wood here. I've not been audited for any business that I've ever owned, thank God, but I have been audited personally, and I will assure you that it is my entertainment expenses. I try to write off every trip as business.
Of course, until they say something.
Business. Right. So, and that is not a good feeling. So that is definitely a trigger. I agree with you on that one. Something else that I wanted to talk to you about, purchasing a business. I had an experience that everything with me has been kind of trial and error. So I really appreciate being to do these podcasts and talk to people like yourself that can speak from experience, not necessarily personal, but just in doing the work, so that people like me don't have to learn the hard way. With that being said, I learned the hard way on something called successor liability. Okay, so when I first bought one of my initial restaurants, I purchased it in the same capacity that it was currently being used, which is a restaurant. Changed the name, but when it was time to file all of my expenses and get licenses through the city and through the state, I was told that there was a balance. And I'm like, no, this is a new company. Like, that was the old company. That's his company. And they explained to me that there's this thing called successor liability. So I don't know if you have any experience with that, but do you, before I ask my next question?
No, I don't have much experience with that. Usually, either the company will completely dissolve and start fresh, but no, I haven't, and that sounds like a nightmare to you.
Oh, it was a complete nightmare, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Their company dissolved, mine is brand new. I've never had any expenses or any, issues with taxes. But anyhow, when you purchase an existing business, even if that business dissolves, you can still be on the hook for their outstanding tax liabilities if you are operating the same type of business. And the reason they do that is, I guess, because they're people, government entities, they assume the worst, right? So they're assuming that, okay, this business owed taxes, so they're trying to start over, create a new name, a new entity, tax ID, and do the same exact business. So even though I was able to prove in every aspect that it's a new business, I had to basically negotiate with the previous owner to pay his taxes in order for me to start a clean slate. Whew, that was tough. Anyway, that was my nightmare
now,
on that.
So the previous owner was no longer on the hook. All those liabilities transferred to you.
That's what they were trying to do. So it was basically like they gave me an option: either he pays it or I would be liable, because it was the same type of business, even though the LLC name was different. but yes, on the hook.
But the
So
property, I'm assuming the restaurant had liens against it that you bought into, basically. So you had to pay those taxes.
that could have been it. It taught me a great lesson about buying existing businesses and just being able to kind of see all of those things
That's the due
beforehand.
diligence. The due
Yes,
diligence process is very important. Yep.
absolutely. So back to the LLC process. There's a lot of people, a lot of companies that are LLCs that are thinking of switching to a S Corp or C Corp. Why would a business want to or need to do that? And is there a certain point where you kind of outgrow an LLC, or should people that currently have LLCs start thinking about whether or not they need to incorporate differently?
Well, usually if you incorporate, if you intend to go public, it has to be a corporation. What I see most commonly is with an S Corp, that's a flow through entity. So it usually, like I see my entertainers, they have their own companies where it's just one employee. With the LLC, it also depends on how many members. So if it's a single member LLC or multi-member LLC, but essentially it depends on the goals of the company, because with a corporation, now you have double taxation. Now you're getting taxed at the corporate level and at the shareholder level. So it really depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on your long-term goals. And of course, you can switch over to a corporation if it comes to that point where, you're getting big and you want to go public. But it's different scenario for each case. But a LLC, of course, instantly gives you a certain liability protection. Of course, you can pierce the corporate veil for certain things that the owners are doing illegally or things like that, where they become personally liable. But for the most part, if you want to avoid getting taxed twice, you want to go down the LLC route.
Right. It just seems that most people that I know that do serious business, they always have like some sort of a corporation, whether it's S Corp or C Corp. So that makes me as a business owner feel like, okay, if I'm intending on stepping my game up, I should go from an LLC to an S Corp.
Yeah, and it's a lot of responsibility having a corporation, because you have to file a separate corporate tax return. But it's a different deadline. Now your tax returns due on March 15th, and then your personal is due on April 5th. So you have to make sure all of your corporate, the bylaws are there, all of your tax filings are there. So it's a lot more responsibility, which most of the mom and pops usually don't want. They want to limit as much as they can with keeping, a separate set of books for this and taxes and all of that. It just becomes a lot more work. So I think that's why LLCs are more common, besides the tax implications for corporations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes me feel a little bit better. Also kind of makes me feel a little lazy. Taking shortcuts. That's fine. So how much money would someone need to have before they would have to retain someone like you to handle like all of their financial business?
How much money?
I'm kind of thinking for myself right now. Again, I feel lazy.
It's funny. I have one client who I started off. He's a writer and he's an actor, and I started working with him maybe 10 years ago. Actually, I have a lot of comedian clients, but he was only writing. He wasn't, doing comedy. And now he's like doing tours with Kevin Hart and writing big
He doesn't have
movies
time
and all this
anymore.
other stuff. And he's like, you've been with me from day one. And I said, well, it's funny because I thought you would leave me and go to the big honcho. He's like, no, you've been with me. He was like, even when I barely had a tax return to file, you were there. So, having said that, I have clients who they're literally 1040 easies, where I tell them, I can walk you through TurboTax and you can do this yourself.
Right.
And then I have some that, every month we have to do the books, we have to close the books, we have to look at the quarterly, we have to figure out what's going on, because we don't want there to be a huge tax liability and underpayment penalties and all kinds of things at the end of the year. So really with me, my business is relationship driven. You know, all money ain't good money.
That's true.
And especially if I see that someone is serious about their business and they're seriously growing it, I can work with you. If you're a startup company, if you're an up and coming person, that's not a problem. Or if you're established, you know, that's not a problem. So I don't have it's vibes for me.
Well, for my people that are watching, Quan and I had a secret meeting this morning. I'm not going to disclose the details of it, but hopefully she sees that I'm serious and I want to do some other things because the finances, again, oh, I can't say this enough, especially for my people of color. We like to take shortcuts, and we got to get out of the business of taking shortcuts so that we can actually have something. I've been on something a little different from a business perspective for at least the last 3 years, and that's just trying to build generational wealth. And
Yes.
again, something that we don't typically do. So when I saw your podcast with your daughter Madison, and just being able to show her, you call it basic, but it's almost like saying common sense. Like it's not that basic to people
Right.
that don't get it, but it's so important that we teach our kids, or that if we're already adults, that we learn ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we are not, for the most part, I would say less than 2% of African American people are born with something. I don't mean, hey, your parents left you a college fund. I mean, that's great, but that's not what I'm talking about when I say generational wealth. I would like for my kids to be able to say, you know what, I don't ever have to rent. I'm just gonna go buy a house, or I've got a down payment, or darn it, I didn't get a scholarship, but that's okay. I can still focus on school without having to worry about a part-time job. And I
it's taking it
wish,
to the next level. Yeah.
right, I wish that we could really operate in that capacity, but we're so busy trying to hustle and take shortcuts. So
Yeah, another thing that is so being your own boss is like a buzzword in the community, but we don't really understand what that entails. Like, I don't want to work a
yes,
9 to 5. Well, you're gonna work a 9 to 9 because owning your own business isn't something that
exactly,
you can clock in and clock out of. It's something that you have to constantly work towards and nurture and put the right people in place, and people that you can
absolutely,
trust and have that knowledge, just the basic foundation. So we always, I want to own my own business, but no one really explains to you what it takes, because we have talent, we have
absolutely,
ideas, we have
absolutely.
all of these things that we want to birth and bring into fruition. But you can't run from the business side of it. No matter what
No,
you do, you
no, and
have
we've
to
got to
handle the
can't
business of the
can't take
business.
shortcuts when it comes to the structure and the money. So that is for sure. You got a sneak peek into one of my operations today, and I mean, I didn't give you the grand tour. Maybe next time, but like we try to like by the book, by the numbers, so that
Yeah.
things are not you don't want to be in business today and out of business.
Yeah. And
And
trying to figure out
yeah,
why. No, you guys definitely
exactly.
have a strong team, and I like what you guys are doing, and everyone
Thank you.
knows their stuff.
Wasn't easy, but it was exactly what you said, finding the right people and putting the right people in the right positions. That is very, 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 very important.
Yeah.
Tell us where we can find your book, not just for kids, for adults too.
It's so funny because all my friends said I do this Maddie Mom Monday video where I'm teaching my daughter something new about business. So we went over the basics of, stocks. We talked about a paycheck, what is FICA, what is the Social Security tax, what is the
She's gonna be a
Medicare, and all
genius.
that. So we do that every Monday, and my friends will call me and say, "Have we done Maddie Mom Mondays yet? I got my pencil and paper ready." So I know a lot of people outside of kids are tuning in too. So
No,
that's
absolutely.
cool. But I have a website, MaddieMom.com, MADIMOM. And I just published my first book last week. I started the pre-orders, and I should be shipping out this week. So I'm excited about that.
Very
It's
nice.
called A is for Accounting, and literally it has a storyline. Of course, it's for children. I say 0 to 12, just depending on if you're reading to your child or if your child is at that age to read to themselves. But it's definitely, the storyline is geared towards children to keep them engaged. And each page just introduces just a new term so that they can get used to that language. So maddymom.com, and then I'm also on Instagram. And if you go to maddymom.com, it'll link you to my social media pages.
Perfect. Man, we need that. We need that. We need that. We need a whole bunch of other things too. But again, I try to do this podcast to help people, give them information, give them at least a starting point, something that they can follow up on, do some homework, research, whatever it takes. But yes, I know it's a need because I get way too many questions on just business and entrepreneurship for it to not be a need. So hopefully everybody that's watching, businessbullish.com, marlonicole.com. This is Quan, and she just gave you guys the A to Z basics on business, bookkeeping, and accounting. And we will see you soon. Thank you, Quan.
Thank you for having me. Talk
Absolutely. All right. Don't forget to subscribe and like. See you soon.